item 5 then is neighbourhood policing, and just before I hand over on this one, as I sort of said a little bit earlier regarding the budget announcement, this is, as you know, I'm committed to neighbourhood policing as a model, and we made some changes roughly about 12 months ago in terms of some of the teams, and obviously the 264 extra officers and staff, many of those will be put into the neighbourhood teams. And obviously what I also should have mentioned earlier as part of the budget was the 603 PCSOs that we currently have are also protected within that overall budget, so that's really important. Again, I'll now hand over for an update on this one.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of neighbourhood policing, then, as you mentioned, we started almost 12 months ago now with the neighbourhood review, or I should say we implemented it. We started it a while before that, but we implemented it, and there will be a formal review of that following the PIR model in March 2019, when it's been up and running for 12 months.
So that's a post-implementation review?
Yeah, apologies, a post-implementation review,
yeah.
So I do think, I understand you're really passionate about neighbourhoods, so am I, and I think we've made some really great strides actually with neighbourhood policing over the last sort of 10 or 11 months, and I'm really pleased with how the different neighbourhood teams are working and some of the feedback that we're getting, in addition to some of the really good reductions in demand at that local level that we're having in terms of missing children, first-time missing children from looked after children's homes, and some of the more kind of problematic and I suppose sticky strategic demand locations, which have just needed some really good local personal contacts being made to start reducing some of that demand, and I think we're seeing that now, which is testament to the neighbourhood model really working. So I'm really confident that that will go from strength to strength moving forward, and I think there's a real buy-in actually across the districts in terms of the neighbourhoods and what they're seeing in terms of how things are working. One of the things that the report also covers is looking at how we are adhering to the neighbourhood policing guidelines that were set by the college in October last year. We've had a look at this in some detail, and we were one of the forces who put ourselves forward to be a pilot to have a look at how we're marrying up against some of those standards, because we were, number one, confident that we were, but also we wanted to kind of be on the front foot and be able to learn from that as well. So the report's kind of split into some of the key areas that are being looked at underneath that strategy. So the first one then is engaging communities. There are obviously some of the minimum expectations that we ask of our neighbourhood policing teams in terms of their face-to-face contact and social media contact, street briefings, KINs, etc., which are working really well and are checked on a fairly regular basis in the Local Policing Governance Board, which I chair. And we are doing some work, which I think you're aware of, with intensive engagement, which looks at very specific and, as it says on the tin, intensive engagement with specific communities to try and help really build some community resilience and sustainability, so that the police can move out of an area essentially, and the community will take over the kind of the sustainable activity in that area. So we're just in the process of doing some of that work in a very specific area in Leeds and Kirklees, and we'll be able to bring back some of the progress on that in a future report. Solving problems, I think we're really strong in terms of the way that we've attacked the problem solving issues within the force. We've given training to all of our frontline staff and specifically to the neighbourhood staff. We use the national decision model to problem solve, and problem solving occurrences for some of our more difficult demand generators are looked at on the local accountability meetings and at the Local Policing Governance Board. So again, some good accountability around problem solving, and certainly we've been commended by HMIC quite recently for how we've rolled that out and the understanding that the officers have about that. Within the report there are 2 or 3 examples of where that reducing demand and problem solving have worked really well. I won't go through those, they're there for people to read. Targeting activity, this is really about understanding the communities in the first instance and the problems within those communities, and then being able to tailor our response to those specific issues. We've got a profiling kind of, I think it speaks about it a bit later in the report actually, so I won't repeat myself at that point, but we have tools which are available to the neighbourhood teams which allow them to understand exactly what's happened and overlay different crime types and incidents, so that we can not only see what individual things are happening, but also if there's a specific location where we've got a problem, we can really target hours and partnership resources at that. Promoting the right culture, again, I really think there's a real history in West Yorkshire Police in terms of neighbourhood policing, so I think that culture's already there. We utilise scrutiny panels and independent advisory groups to scrutinise some of our operational activity and also consult on some of the more thorny issues that we might do that might impact on communities. And also, as I've mentioned, we have community meetings and face-to-face interactions on a regular basis as well. I've already mentioned about the profiling mapping system, which is within the building analytical capability section. And then in terms of developing staff, again, it's an ongoing process. We've just looking at giving the neighbourhood officers some protected time, probably about 4 days in each year, to really focus on the things that they need to understand in terms of problem solving and early intervention, because these things change all of the time, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Yeah. We have the bi-monthly neighbourhood forum where the neighbourhood inspectors can share best practice, and we've now got the internal What Works site, which I think I spoke about in the last item, where it's important that we share what's working well, but equally we understand what hasn't worked, and then we can try something different. The neighbourhood policing section of the Local Policing Governance Board is a consistent 2-hour section of that board, which runs on a bi-monthly basis as well. And there are specific things that we bring to that board and hold people to account for. Finally, penultimately I should say, we're holding PCSO. You mentioned about the PCSOs and us having quite a healthy chunk of PCSOs across West Yorkshire, which is a brilliant resource and one which I think we can get even more out of than we do at the moment. So I think they're a fantastic group of people who really understand their communities. I just think they can do even more for us than they're doing at the moment, and we're involving them in that work, in thinking about exactly what it is that they can help us to achieve. There are certain areas of the force where the PCSOs are very, very specifically linked into certain, like primary schools, for example, and it works really well. We just need to generate that learning around the force, and we're doing that by speaking to the PCSOs in different workshops, and Richard Close is taking that piece of work forward. Lastly then, we've recently had an insight visit from our inspectors in the HMIC FRS. They came to see us in January of this year to review neighbourhood policing and see where we were up to in terms of the developments that we had spoken to them about last time they came in May of last year. And I think overwhelmingly, whilst we're waiting for the formal feedback, the informal feedback has been extremely positive. They're really pleased. They visited every district in the force, and they were very complimentary in terms of the way neighbourhood teams were working, the commitment to neighbourhood policing, and the understanding that the officers had about the neighbourhoods and communities that they police. So really pleased with the efforts of the districts and the neighbourhoods and the model moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I welcome you made a reference to the College of Policing sort of guidance, and it's important that we do sort of link in with some of that, because again it's about that consistency and taking on best practice. So it's good that you mentioned that, and embedding the sort of local learning. It was really just to get a sense of how that is sort of working in practice, for example, with key partners at local level, councillors and communities in terms of updates, because obviously I myself often go out there,
Yeah.
spend time with some of the teams, but also speak with councillors and others, and the picture is variable. And you know, and some of that information sharing seems to happen better in some areas than others.
Yeah.
And you know, but you know, obviously I accept some of the demands and pressures that people have been facing. But if you could comment on that, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the first things is that, well, the kind of contacts at that local level definitely sit with the neighbourhood inspector and the sergeants. That's their very clearly their role, and something that I expect them to do on a regular basis. You're right that some people do that better than others, and some people, I think it's about the way that people want to be communicated with as well. Some of the districts have fed back that, for instance, some of the councillors really like the newsletters that we produce. Other people don't like that and would rather have face-to-face communications, and that's quite varied as well. So it's about trying to generate a way of doing that which pleases most of the people most of the time, but also about having that realistic discussion about what neighbourhood policing is in 2019, because it is different than it was in 2010, and we need to have that dialogue with people as well. So I think where it's working well, that's the point of the neighbourhood forum, where we can learn. And if newsletters are working well for the majority of councillors in a particular area, it's probably going to work well in other areas, and we need to take that on board. So,
yeah, I think what I was getting at there was I'm aware that there's some like joint tasking type meetings that take place. Some councillors attend those, and in some areas it appears that the information sharing within those meetings are quite fulsome, and in others they're not. And I know there's always some nuances around some of that, but there does appear to be some quite big inconsistencies at times.
Yeah, I suppose, like you say, there's a different. It depends on what's being discussed as to what information shared, I suppose, is the first thing to say. But that's something that I can take back and we can raise at one of the neighbourhood forums about, you know, what is there a standard way of running those meetings and a standard group of people that are invited, and what do we share?
Yes. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so we can learn from that, yeah, definitely. Could you take a note of that, Jane? Thanks.
Yeah. Was anything on this part, Jane? I've got obviously some other questions, but
just a quick one on you. You said you were looking to understand what works and then record that accordingly. And it was great, the inspector's comment from HMICFRS, very reassuring. How are you teasing out what works and perhaps more importantly what's not working, so you can either stop as soon as possible or adjust accordingly?
Mainly through, well, those two forums that I've spoken about, really. So the local accountability meetings and the local policing governance board is where we talk about specific issues, and we might ask at that in those forums for certain districts to volunteer to take a particular proof of concept forward and then report back in 6 months' time, and then we just look at the data about whether it's worked or not. So
has that happened then? Because we've nearly a year in.
Yeah, so we've got lots of different examples of that working. For an example then, the first time missing children as an example, Wakefield decided that they were going to try to bring in kids who've been missing for just on the first instance, and bring them in with parents and guardians, explain to them what exactly happened when somebody was reported missing, and try and give them some education so that next time they're out and about and perhaps just not letting us know that they're not actually missing but at a friend's house, that they would think about the implications of being reported missing and help us in terms of reducing demand. And that's worked really well at Wakefield, and as a result of that, following the local policing governance board, that's now been mandated across the district. So that's just one example of how that works, and that then will be shared on our What Works forum, so that we don't lose that in terms of corporate memory when people move on. Okay,
thanks. So, I mean, just following slightly on from that then, so and you mentioned the review, obviously we had the interim sort of update a little while ago, but obviously I look forward to the actual outcome of the formal review, and understand what sort of impact and focus that brings. So So did you want to say any more about that at this point? Or
I think that obviously we'll just as we do with any other post-implementation review, we'll look at the original business case, we'll look at whether the benefits that we expected from that have been realised. If they have, great, and we'll carry on doing that. If they haven't, why not? And we'll also have a look at gathering feedback. We'll obviously do interviews and focus groups as we would, but obviously really important that with the neighbourhood review we need community feedback. Obviously we get some of that from the feedback that we get by this office. We'll get some of that directly from the neighbourhoods, but all of that then together will come back into a post-implementation review, and you know, I think we'll find that, you know, I'm hopeful that that will be a positive picture.
yeah, and I certainly hope that, given the budget set last year of the increase in officers, that obviously the officers that have gone into those teams are starting to bed in, more recruitment to come. And I know it's like a super tanker type analogy, isn't it, where you know, and I did try to explain this to people at the panel, that you know, the 264 don't just magically appear overnight. It's
then new officers that then need to
but to be fair, we are, you know, sort of 18 months to 2 years into recruitment, and you know, hopefully it's starting to show a difference now.
I certainly feel that when I spend a day or an afternoon or, you know, a period of time with a neighbourhood team, there is a really clear sense of focus and direction in those teams about what they're trying to achieve. I really do think that is really starting to bed in there.
Yeah, okay. Also, there's a reference on page 3 to reality checks, and it's really just explaining a little bit more about what those are.
They were mainly workshops. We did 21 workshops across the force with sergeants, PCs, PCSOs, really to question them about their role, you know, what they do in terms of problem solving, community engagement. Really, this was about making sure that they understood what their role was as neighbourhood police officers, PCSOs and sergeants, that they were really clear in what we'd set them in terms of expectations, and if there was anything that we could do as a force to help them in making their job easier and, you know, delivering better outcomes for communities. So that's what those were about, and I'm just waiting for the evaluation of that kind of feedback, which is going to come back to the next local policing governance board.
Could an example of that be, for instance, where, so I've picked up and I've fed this back, around where PCSOs have access to cars or don't have access to cars, in getting out to some of the more outlying areas within their sort of neighbourhood footprint areas? Is that the sort of issue?
That's the kind of thing that might come out in one of those workshops, for example, and then we can think about. We need to be really clear, don't we, that whilst we want people to get out to our more rural communities, once they're out there, they need to be out and as visible as they can be, and being on foot might not be, actually being on a bike might be much more visible. So it's that kind of thing that we can feed back, which actually there's fairly simple solutions to that, isn't there? And then there'll be some more complex things that we need to kind of problem solve, which might mean partnership involvement or funding, etc. But okay.
Also, in terms of abstraction, so when I first started going out and talking to some of the teams in the, you know, first few months, if you like, of the restructured teams, I was picking up a lot still around abstractions and the demand, pulling away the dedicated officers, shall we say, from the neighbourhood policing teams into response, call centre type issues as well. And, you know, I know there's always going to be an element of that, because you've got to have that ability to move people around depending on what the threats are. But obviously, do you get a sense that's starting to settle down?
Yeah. So more recent reality checks around abstractions have shown that the SLTs, I think, are much more actively engaged in making sure that the neighbourhood staff are utilised, because they do need to be utilised for some of the jobs that come in. As long as they're utilised for jobs that are appropriate for neighbourhood officers and they're within their area, then that's good. That's exactly what they should be being utilised for. So this is not about not being available for any call handling at all. It's about trying to maintain people in their communities dealing with jobs that are appropriate for neighbourhood officers to deal with. So I'm confident that that has settled a lot, and that when people are abstracted, it's more likely to be for things that they've got specialist skills, such as, let's say they might be abstracted for a football duty because they're level 2 PSU trained, for example, and there are only so many officers within the force that have that, so they might be abstracted for a Saturday into a football match, let's say, or they might be, you know, around bonfire night, Halloween, things like that, but very often they're abstracted to do things within their own district area. And you know, for me, things like bonfire are very much community engagement events anyway, aren't they? So they're not inappropriate for neighbourhood officers to be dealing with.
Around sort of major events like that,
I think we're over that very difficult demand period that we had over the summer, which was exceptional and which was almost all hands to the pump every day, I think. And I think that's where we were in the summer. I think things have settled down considerably since then.
Well, obviously we look forward to the review and exploring some of that. James, anything?
Just to say, for the PAR, if you haven't already included it, the RE survey will give you that sense of changing public perception, visibility.
I think we have, Jane, but I will double check.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.